Welcome, friends, to another episode of The Button Board. Today, I am super excited to be joined by Ying, a scientist and guardian to Henry the Bengal cat. Henry chooses his own buttons and uses an optimized board with hand choices. This distinguished gentleman pairs Phi EQ with zero filter. His favorite diagnosis? Annoying. Find them at Mr. Henry Knows on Instagram. Hi, Ying. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today about your journey.
Hi, Alexis. I'm so glad to be here and thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so curious because I just came across your profile a few months ago on social media and you all are amazing. So I'm wondering, and how did this process start for you? How did you hear about buttons and what made you decide that starting them with Henry would be a good idea?
Yeah, so it's a pretty interesting story. We haven't been active on social media for that long. I think it's less than a year. But you, Alexis, you were the one that opened my eyes to buttons. So I had been following you for quite a number of years before I came across the clip of Bunny with the stranger pour ouch sort of scenario. And that was the incident that really made me think that I think buttons are legit. And it's something that I really want to get into. I didn't actually have pets for a long time, but when I got Henry a couple of years later, I immediately thought, I'm going to get him onto Button. So from day one, I started talking to him in Button Speak, and we went on for about 6 months with Button Speak, and I also taught him hand choices, actually before we even got into buttons. So I think his journey is a little bit the inverse of what people normally do, where maybe they start with buttons and then they try and teach hand choices and answering questions later. But for Henry, he started with hand choices and then he moved on to buttons. So I think that presented its own unique challenges, but maybe also is the reason why he progresses quite quickly now.
That's awesome. Tell us about the unique challenges that starting with hand choices presented to you.
Yeah, because she, I think, built a really strong foundation of words to start with and hand choices. So he was already answering questions with hand choices by the time he got buttons. So he really got access to quite a lot of expression capability with that. When I first introduced buttons, he just dug in his heels. He's like, I'm not having this. What's the point? What's the point of buttons? I already have my hand choices. They come straight to me. I don't have to put in much effort. And I didn't realize that at the time. So I was oscillating between, does he not get the buttons or is he refusing? And it wasn't until probably about the fifth button, which was litter, which he used to swear, which I then realized that, yeah, he actually understands everything. And he's just deciding when he would use it, which is just on his terms.
Yeah, that's such an interesting observation, moving between choice, like the two-hand choice, to full agency, right? Because we like to think about agency as choice and control, but I think there's a pretty distinct difference between agency itself and choice. Choice, for example, you can choose between the apple and the banana, but with agency, you can say, I don't want either of those. I want fish instead. So I wonder if you noticed that sort of cognitive leap in him and if his world expanded once he realized that he could really determine and decide and have so many more options than what he was experiencing with the two-hand choice.
Yeah, so I think definitely one limitation of the hand choices is that he can only choose what I offer. So if I don't offer the right thing, then that's it, it's done. But with buttons, definitely you do have the opportunity to, as you say, have agency and initiate on your own. But the issue is that because he knew so many words at the beginning, and you have to start from somewhere with buttons, just the number of buttons just wasn't quite enough to cover everything that he wanted to say. And so we were stuck in limbo for a while where I was like, we've got maybe about 5 buttons or so. You're not really using them. Should I add more? Do you get it? And we were stuck there for quite a couple of months until the litter thing, where I realized that he actually did understand. And then I thought, I'm going all in, adding more buttons. And I think he really picked up interest in it when he was getting more words to be able to express, especially his frustration, which may not, answering that hand choice piece, may not necessarily be what I automatically offer him to express.
Yeah, absolutely. So you would start with broader categories of buttons and use the two-hand choice to narrow it down a little bit into the specifics of what he might want.
Yeah, it kind of goes into a little bit of my button philosophy, if you will.
Yeah.
So we don't actually have toy names on our board, even though he knows what all his toys are called. But our sequence for playing is that you press play and then I offer you toys. And then you can choose the toy that you want. And he learned that literally when he just arrived. And within a couple of days, he was already choosing toys by just me showing him the objects, and he would just pick which ones he wants. So since we already had that system down, I thought it wasn't really needed with buttons. And so we managed to save on toy names. We save on body parts as well. So if he goes ouch, I'll just go, okay, hand choice is which part is ouch. Or although I'm thinking I maybe will put a little bit more hand choice, a few more body parts on the board just for speed. So yeah, so that's how the system works with the larger category words. I'm just looking at the board.
Yeah.
Yeah, with the larger category words and then using hand choices to drill down. But I think also I'll say that one way that we use hand choices that maybe people don't automatically or naturally think of is that I ask some pretty complex questions with it. So it's not just, do you want this? But it's also, did you mean to say that you wanted this because of that? Or were you trying to explain this? And just with yes or no, he can go yes or no. And I think with some of our more complex videos that are up on Instagram, you can really see how this is really effective when I'm trying to guess what he's saying with the limited words.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this system, honestly, because I think as having hundreds of buttons is a lot for a non-human learner or a human learner to navigate. So being able to have these broad categories and dial down in a really efficient and what seems like accurate manner is super smart. I love this. I love this strategy. So I'd love to hear what some of the first button words that you gave him were and why you chose those.
So I started probably fairly traditionally with play, puzzle, training, and he wasn't interested.
Yes.
Presumably because we had a schedule for these kinds of things and he wasn't particularly fussed when they happened. So with the litter button, I gave it to him because he's a cat. Cats are clean. If maybe there was an issue with the litter box, he could tell me. But then I realized that he was pressing the button when the litter box was clean. And I'm a little bit embarrassed to say that it took me months to realize that he wasn't talking about the litter box, he was swearing. And it was Elsie actually that sort of opened my eyes to that because I saw the video about the litter box sweater, I think it was.
Yeah.
And I realized, oh, wait, hang on. I think he's swearing. And it coincided as well with a period of time where I was switching his wet food brand because the previous brand had changed the recipe and he didn't like it anymore. And so he was complaining about his food, really.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think there are at least 3 cat learners that I'm aware of that use litter box to express frustration, which is just so interesting because clearly that's not something that we model, right? We're not intending for our learners to use litter box in any way other than to talk about the actual litter box. It's like a one-to-one transference there. So it's so interesting. How would you presume that our learners come to adopt that as a swear word? Do you think it's because it smells or because it's a place where they let go of waste, or what would you imagine that would be about?
I think for me, I would probably link it to the feeling of disgust and something that's unwanted. Because I think that's the way they learn the words, right? This word has a connotation around it. And it may not be a traditional meaning that we teach them, but it evokes feeling and emotion. And I think we don't maybe think enough about emotion and what emotion words are evoking.
Yeah. So when Henry started using litterbox as a swear word, was your thought process, oh, now I need to add more emotion words so that he can express himself in other ways emotionally?
I think that was the gateway for me. It was kind of the point where I thought, wait, hang on, he does know what's going on, but also I think he likes to complain. He is a very sweet boy. He's a very nice boy. But he does have very specific ideas of how things should be, as probably lots of cats do. And so I thought, so maybe I'll give him more buttons to be able to control what his environment is like. So I started with the control piece first and gave him a couple of buttons around that. So things like sound and smell and fit and broken. And then we only got into emotions this year, although I had been modeling them all along. And I would use hand choices to ask, are you feeling this? So yeah, it wasn't an overnight introduction. So he already had all the concepts before.
That's awesome. I think that's the right way to go about it too. I think it can be really tricky. People want obviously to know and understand how their animal companions are feeling, but adding those too soon without the proper sort of scaffolding towards that can be really complicated, right? Because it's tricky enough for us to understand how another person is actually feeling when they say they're angry or sad, right? So with non-human, even more complicated, tricky to model those things. I think they need to have a framework of abstract concepts. And I think that your framework of the two-hand choice and really being able to dial down and tease apart the intricacies of what's going on in Henry's mind was so valuable to that process for you.
Yeah, and I really pick up on the word that you see, scaffolding, which I love. And I learned it from an education context, even though I'm not from the sector, but I became aware of it. And I actually use it I just put out a guide on Instagram on what I think are 3 really helpful steps to teaching your pets use buttons. And scaffolding is one of the things that I talk about in terms of modeling words. And I think for me, I kind of think it's probably a bit more relevant when you get to more abstract and more advanced words. Because scaffolding means they need to have something around it, which means they need to understand what's around it first. But definitely with the abstract concepts, that helps a lot. And maybe I'll just give everyone an example of how that works. So one of the things that I know people who have started out and are thinking of abstract words might be thinking of adding help. I've seen some people who model saying just the word itself, so just saying help. And scaffolding means you add other words to it that they already know. So the way I would model help is to say, Mum, help Henry, or help Henry find toy. And so you need to put a few more words around it so they understand the context of it. And it's not a framework that I followed rigidly, but because I narrate and explain everything to him, it just happened anyway. And I don't know whether it's the scientist in me, but I explain a lot to him. I even caught myself trying to teach him physics the other day about ice becoming water when it's hot. But it's really interesting because I don't know if he's learned that from me, because I have a couple of examples where he's tried to explain back to me why he's feeling something.
Oh, that's so cool. Can you tell us about one of those examples?
Yeah, sure. So one of the examples, probably, I've got a really crazy example that will probably blow everyone's mind, which is, I call it the great medicine mystery, which is, I don't even know where to start with this. So this was I'll call it a conversation that went over 20 minutes.
Wow.
It had, I counted 39 button presses, 12 buttons. And trying to condense that for Instagram was an interesting exercise.
Oh, impossible.
So he started with medicine. So like any pet parent, I was like, oh my God, medicine, something's wrong. And medicine, ouch, I give him 10 choices. Which body part is it? And he booked eye. So okay, eye, maybe his eyes itchy or something. And I checked him and his eyes looked completely fine. And the moment I set him down, he walked over and then he went to his tomorrow button and he pressed it 10 times. And Henry is not a spammer. I think because he already understands words, so he doesn't really feel the need to spam. And we run a pretty tight ship here, so spamming gets you nothing. And he pressed tomorrow 10 times. And at the time, I wasn't quite sure what he was talking about. But in hindsight, my theory is that he treated tomorrow as a button that was saying not today. Because he has buttons for now, soon, later. And then he's got tomorrow, which is a different kind of temporal concept.
Yeah.
That's not immediate. He doesn't have yesterday. He has it now, but he didn't have at the time. So he doesn't have yesterday. So I was like, okay, tomorrow. Bit confused here. And then he pressed scared. And then I was like, okay, this is getting more confusing. And then he pressed cold and hot. And then I was like, oh, okay, I don't really know what's going on here. And then he pressed tired about 6 or 7 times. I was like, okay, so the tired is clearly pretty important. And at this point, I was thinking it's about midday. It's not really the time to be tired. I haven't done anything tiring. But I will say that I slept in that day because I was feeling on the brink of falling sick. And I was starting to think, wait, is he talking about me? And then he went, okay. And then I tried to continue asking him questions. And he pressed, help Henry. And you're like, oh my God, is he sick? And then I went back to the medicine point again and asked, who needs the medicine? You were talking about medicine. Who medicine? And he pressed mum. And I was like, oh, wait, mum, eye, medicine. And I thought the only thing that makes sense is that I had used a lot of eye drops the night before because my eyes were really itching. And I was complaining about them. I was like, this is the only thing that makes sense. His eyes are fine. He talked about me. He talked about eye and medicine. And I was like, okay, is he maybe talking about me potentially being sick and then sleeping in the next day? And as I got closer to what I thought he meant, he started pressing happy, it's okay, love you. And it's like, okay, so putting all those clues together, the narrative that I came up with was, I think that he was he was scared because I overslept. He didn't know what was happening to me. And so he tried to give me the reason of why I overslept to piece that together.
Yeah.
And then now that I've emerged and I'm okay, then he's happy and everything's fine. And I actually put that to him with hand choices. So I said, Henry, scared, mum, ouch, tired. And he booked yes.
Oh, wow.
And then I went one step further and I went, Henry, scared, mum, tired, no food. And then he booked really fast, yes.
Wow.
So,
that is incredible.
So there's an entire narrative of the reason, of his feeling.
Yeah.
And there's a time component to it as well. And I was like, this is quite crazy.
Yeah, no, that is wild. It's so complex. And going back to what we were talking about before, the scaffolding necessary
Yes.
to achieve that level of communication, it has to be in place. There has to be a history of context that build towards this mutual understanding, because a lot of the language we use with our learners becomes very relational, right? They're going to be communicating things to us that if said in any other context would make zero sense, but because of their use in these specific contexts over and over again, it begins to make sense. And then you have a two-hand choice to really distill that information is so powerful. That's awesome. Have you made any tutorials online about how you taught Henry the two-hand choice? Yeah,
I did spot that there was a bit of a gap around hand choices. And because after a couple of chats with people, I realized that two-hand choices were thought of as an advanced skill. Because the typical journey that people go on is that they teach buttons first, and then after they go, oh wait, but I want my learner to be able to answer questions, and then they go to two-hand choice. But for us, it's the other way around, because he knew the hand choices, he knew the words, he was already answering questions, and then he got buttons. So so I did make a tutorial about that. It starts about the first step being to just show them objects, name the objects, and then drop the objects, but just continue using the name of the object. And then after that, introducing slightly more advanced concepts like intangible words, like maybe training or puzzle, or maybe not play. So things that they already know, but now they have to associate it with your hand. And then finally to yes and no. And then it's quite interesting because I put a little disclaimer in there to say that for them to answer yes and no questions, they need to know what yes and no mean. But I didn't kind of cover it within the hand choices guide. Obviously, that was the top question that everybody asked. How do you teach yes and no? So I put out another guide on yes and no as well. And that was pretty interesting because when I went to make the guide, I thought, let me check what the dictionary definitions are of yes and no. And there's like a dozen different meanings of them. Yeah. So I don't know how people are modeling it when they're teaching yes and no. So I always try to model in as many scenarios as possible so that they get the fullest meaning of the word as I can give him. And so I put, I think, 3 different scenarios for yes and 3 different scenarios for no in my guide. And hopefully that helps people just start modeling with yes and no. Yeah, that's amazing. I remember seeing that post and being very impressed by it. I'd love to get a link to the two-hand choice post that you made so that we can share it along with this interview whenever it goes live. That would be, I think people would be thrilled to see that. Yeah, that would be cool. Yeah. And also I think I've got a little bit of spare time at the moment. So I was thinking of putting out a couple more my guides. And I'm actually targeting the people who have tried buttons and haven't been able to progress. Because that's where we were for months. Yeah. There's a lot of help, obviously, on the Schulmpet website and with all the leadership calls and things. But I do know that some people, whatever they're trying isn't working. And I wonder whether some of the things that I tried, which maybe might be either outdated or unconventional, might actually work. Because who's to say what's the right way as long as it works, right?
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. I think a lot of people go into this and they're like, here is step 1 through 10, and then you have a talking dog or cat, right? I'm like, it's not like that at all. And that's why I don't like to consider myself an expert on anything, because I feel like we're learning so much and there are so many different approaches that are working really well for people that I would have never considered. And I think it really does take a community coming together and crowdsourcing this information and look at this technique that really worked well for my specific learner. And look how this learner is using this button versus this learner using this button over here. It really does take a community for us to gather as much information as we need to for us all to be successful. So I really appreciate the educational materials you're putting out there. I think they're brilliant.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. You're a scientist, and I'm curious to know how your scientific bathroom? What? Sorry. I don't know where that word, how your scientific background maybe played into how you approach this and what sort of science you practice. I'm curious.
Well, I'm an environmental scientist, but I
Okay.
think probably, yeah, I'm not employed as a scientist at the moment, so I'm more into analytics. So I think the way I approach things is just very analytical, very rational. And I was a skeptic too, right? But also, and I commented on one of your posts about Occam's razor and
Yeah.
how if we're seeing our pets press with intent and it looks like the context is right, the intent is there, the easiest interpretation is that they mean what they're pressing, right? And I think a lot of the times they mean it, only we don't understand it, probably because they haven't got enough words to say what they really want.
Yeah.
I had Henry press cold once when I think he meant dry, because he doesn't have the word dry. I'm not quite sure how he associated with cold, but I knew he meant dry because I've actually left a button box out on the board now, and our system is that when he wants new words, he touches the box. And during that conversation, when I was trying to figure out what the code was, he touched the box. And I thought, okay, you want new words. And previously, I used that to introduce new buttons. So I would bring out the selection, and this is what I call co-design. But very interestingly, in that example, he wasn't actually asking for a new button. He was asking for a new word just for the conversation, so just temporary. Because I later checked with him whether he wanted a button, and he said no. So he just wanted me to offer him the word dry, so he could tell me dry. And this was when I was washing his feeders, and he's trying to tell me the feeder is dry, and I needed to refill it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he was trying to tell me he wanted the word just in that moment. So
That's amazing.
just imagine how much more they could say if they had the words, but then with just being realistic, I don't have enough space to have 100 buttons, which is why I need to go with the optimized board. So yeah, so there's a lot of thought that I put into what words are going to be the most useful for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about, you mentioned co-design. I'm interested because you also mentioned that he selects his own words. And I imagine that's what you're talking about here, where he has the box, he can ask for new words. But I'd love to hear more about that thought process and how it came to that's how you wanted to operate.
Yeah, I think it was around about the point where we had 12 buttons or so. And he obviously he's got a very large receptive vocabulary, and he understands what's going on. So he understood the concept. And I'll say this first in case people go off and try it without building the concept first. He understands what a button is, and he understands what a new button is. So when I say to him, do you want a new button? He knows what that means. And then I thought, actually, he knows how to choose, right? We've been doing choosing for ages. So why don't I just let him choose buttons? And so I pick words from his receptive vocabulary and I offer them to him in the form of button boxes so that he knows that's the new button. And then he picks the one he wants. So it's really interesting as well because this has evolved. And so we started with just 2 boxes and he chose one. And he chose mum first, which was so sweet and really interesting. And I think it suggested to me that social connection was really important to him, which was something that maybe I hadn't given enough thought to.
Yeah.
And then the next button he chose was Henry. And it was almost as if he thought, Mom's got a button, so now I need one too.
Yeah.
And we were only about 12 buttons or so in his name, and my name, to be honest, wasn't a priority because I thought there's so many other words, right? And usually we say when the learners press the button, it's inferred that it's referring to themselves already. So the names are not priority. But they were for him. So when he chose Henry, he chose 1 out of 4 boxes. And being a scientist, I mixed up the order. And then I also tested by removing some of the options, and he chose Henry. He wanted him. It's evolved. Yeah, and it's evolved along the way from him choosing one choice to him realizing that he might be able to choose more than one, to him just deciding, no, I just have all of them. One of the funniest ones, which was when I was giving him a couple of choices for feelings. Yeah, was when he literally started just tapping all the choices that I put down. And I said to him, you can't have all of them, you have to choose. And he pressed annoying.
That's amazing. That would also be my reaction. Oh, give me all the words. Why can't I have all the words?
Yeah,
That's incredible.
Yeah, so that was funny. Yeah.
So stepping away from the buttons for a moment, what does his daily life look like? What does he do when he's not pressing buttons? What do you do together?
Yeah, so we've got a bit of a schedule for us. In the morning, he gets a bit of a petting session where he really loves his butt pets. Um, and then throughout the day, he'll be chilling at different parts of the house. He's got a routine where he goes for a nap between about 1 and 5 p.m., which is when his feeder goes off. And then in the evening, we have a play session. And then it's play and then dinner. Yeah, and then that's what a typical day looks like. And every so often, he's also harness trained, so I'll take him out for a walk, which he likes. But he's very picky about what the conditions need to be like. So if it's too
Same.
hot, too windy,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, and he's also got a cat wheel, which helps him expend some of the energy. I think when I first got him, he was a real handful. Causing chaos everywhere. And I think it's a combination of all the enrichment and also the buttons to help him communicate with the hand choices as well that helped him calm down a bit.
Yeah.
So we do quite a bit of enrichment as well. Every day it's either puzzle or foraging, which is when I hide food around the house. Yeah, so he also enjoys that. Yeah.
I love that. How old was he when you brought him home?
He was 1.
He
So
was
I rescued him from a family that was giving him up because they had a newborn who was allergic.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
So it was a little bit of an awkward time, I think, with that family. But I think that I've given him a lot of opportunity to broaden his horizons.
Oh, yeah.
And,
It seems like he's got a pretty rich world right now. Yeah.
I think he likes being in control. I sort of refer to the soundboard sometimes as IT help desk. And he's I would say, a very utilitarian user. And maybe that reflects my style as well, because I'm a pretty rational human as well. I'm not overly emotional. I think I tend more to the rational side. And so he's not a narrator. He doesn't really chat. And he usually goes to the board when there's something he wants to tell me.
Yeah, that's great. I think that probably saves on a little bit of work that you would have to do. What are you talking about? When you know specifically that he's got something that he's requesting or needs from you, you can probably dial down into that a little bit more quickly than if he's just like, la, la, look, it's hot outside. Look, there's a bird. Look. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah. It's a very different learner profile. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also think it's interesting how our learners a lot of times seem to reflect us in the ways in which they communicate, and how much of that is because that's how I've modeled pragmatic. So of course my learner is going to communicate in a pragmatic way, or I'm always talking about my emotions or having an emotional response. So my learner is likewise probably going to exhibit similar behaviors because that's what they've been modeled. And I don't love making and I don't love making the comparison between human children and non-human learners necessarily, but it seems that's something we see as well in childhood development, is that what they have seen modeled for them is how they're going to behave in the world, how they're going to display. Those are going to be the behaviors that come most naturally to them. That's super interesting.
Yeah. There are people that talk about conditioning and whether, learners who are pressing buttons are being conditioned. And while I don't agree with that view, and I can see from the way Henry's using his buttons that I haven't conditioned any response to what he's pressing. But I do think that style-wise, there's definitely potential that they are mirroring back to us what experienced. I would be really interested if somebody did a study on this.
Yeah, me too. And I think on the conditioning question, I think when I hear that criticism, most people aren't talking about conditioning in a very nuanced way. What they're saying is this dog gets a treat every time it presses a button. They're talking about that sort of conditioning. And I think there is an element of conditioning. We've conditioned them to the understanding that if they press play, the outcome of that is going to be play, right? So there is that sort of level of conditioning going on, but not in the sense that they press a button because they get attention. And of course, to some extent, that is also true, right? I might say, hey, because I need somebody's attention, right? So I'm using language as a way to get attention so that I can then have a more nuanced conversation, or so I can really express my needs. But in order to do that, I have to have somebody's attention. I can't speak into the void and have my needs met by another person. I have to be communicating relationally with another being. So I think on the question or criticism of conditioning, sure, conditioning is happening all the time. They're conditioning us, right? that when they press play, we play, right? It's not a one-way street. There's conditioning happening all the time in both ways, but it's much more nuanced than the criticisms that are coming at us seem to suggest.
And I'll maybe say a couple of things around that as
Please.
well. And I think, firstly, I'm kind of naturally like this. I'm pretty stoic. I don't react a lot. So I don't think that he's been conditioned for a reaction from me, because most of the time I don't react. And for me, I think one thing as well that I guess is part of my philosophy again, is that I don't think about it as button training. I think about it as a communication tool. So you don't train someone to communicate. It's just a tool. But the other thing, which your example about them pressing play and then we play. So the other day, Henry pressed play and he didn't want to play. So I thought that was really interesting. So let me give you this story here.
Please.
So what had happened was that, again, it's with the feeder. I forgot to give him a round of the feeder food, which he loves. So he wasn't happy. And I was telling to him that I forgot. I said afternoon, or what did I say? I said night feeder food, forgot. And then he pressed play. And I was like, we're talking about feeder food. It's your favorite feeder food. Why are you pressing play? And then I gave him hand choices. And I said, do you want to play now? And he said, really definitively, no. And I was like, do you mean forgot feeder because play? And he booked yes.
Oh, wow.
So we don't have a because button, but just by juxtaposing the word play against what he actually didn't want to do, he managed to get that meaning across. And that is absolutely not conditioning.
That is absolutely not conditioning. You're 100% correct. You're 100% correct. Yeah. Yeah. I guess all I was suggesting is that conditioning exists in the world. There's no way to avoid it. But a lot of what we're seeing here goes far beyond the sort of operant model that people suspect that we're playing within. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's so cool. That's so cool. Are there any sort of aspirational concepts that you'd like to explore with him? Is there anything that you think is out of reach? What's next? Sorry, that was like 7 questions in one.
So the last 2 buttons I gave him were remember and confused, which he knows, and we've already used them. So right now I'm just waiting to get my next round of buttons. So we've run out of the new ones, which he wasn't happy about. And I'm wanting to add some question words. So we don't have question words at the moment. So I'm not quite sure if she'll want them. I did put them in some of the co-design rounds before and he didn't choose them. So it could either be he doesn't want them, or he didn't think that they were that important. So some question words, some more time-based words. He's got the tomorrow's got the yesterday. I want to give him like morning, night, and maybe also today. Probably go with a couple more emotions as well. He likes emotions. He uses them quite a lot. Yeah, and I'm really interested in kind of the cognitive aspect of things, words to do with thinking, and I guess also dreaming as well, because that's been something that I've modeled once or twice with hand choices. And I think it's really weird that because the first time he was streaming, he woke up, I described to him what I saw, which was that he was running really fast. I said, your feet smooth, but at the same time, you settle, but feet smooth. So try to use kind of the contrast there to show the meaning. And then I asked him, were you scared? And I gave him the hand choices and he was like, boop, yes. and so the next time I saw him dream, when he woke up again, I gave him the hand choices and I said, did you dream, Henry, dream? And then he booked, yes. I was like, wait, I've only modeled it once. Are you sure you know what you're doing? So that's something that I want to explore a little bit more. But I'm also conscious that while I'm really interested with whether he will talk about dreams, because we don't have a lot of buttons, right, compared to the 100-button board, I don't know how much utility we get from that. So I think there might be an aspect of me still trying to guess and give him more words what the dream was. Yeah.
Oh, that'll be so much fun, though. What an exciting path to follow and explore.
Yeah. I think and because when I model remember as well, I tend to recount the day and then what we did during that day, and especially if we went outside, what happened, what we saw on the walk. So yeah, I think some of that has definitely trained him about past events and describing them, which is why he uses them back as well. I had one occasion where he was telling me about the vet. and he was pressing medicine friend, and
Medicine
this
friends.
was, yes, and I was asking him, here he comes. Yeah, I was asking him about whether he was remembering the medicine friend, because we had to do an emergency visit because she wasn't peeing, which was a false alarm, but it was not fun for him or me.
Yeah.
And he had a thermometer up his unmentionable. And so I said to him, you remember medicine friend? Do you remember medicine friend? Medicine friend, check backside, ouch. And obviously he pressed, annoying.
That's hilarious.
But I was really pretty pleased that he didn't press scared. So
Yeah.
I think the vet
Yeah,
was
that's
still okay.
awesome.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
fact that he's referring to veterinary friend that's so cool. My dogs would
Oh,
never.
that's something
Yeah.
that's something that I've modeled for him. So yeah, that's what we call the vet, which I think is helpful, I think, in terms of the friend concept. Yeah.
Yeah. Who else does he refer to as friend? Are you friend? Are there other animals that he refers to as friend?
We're a single animal family, not so much other animals, but we do have sitters. So the sitters are Chloe friend or Joe friend. And yeah, those are the concepts. And sometimes I have friends come over as well, and I'll say mum friend. So yeah, so contexts like that as well. Yeah.
How do other people who have met Henry and seen him communicating with buttons, how do they respond? What's their reaction like?
I think it's a mixture of disbelief and those who buy in, they go, wow, this is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And have you
Yeah.
have you told your veterinary team that Henry uses buttons to request medicine or to tell you when he's in pain?
No, I haven't actually. That one-off visit to the emergency vet, which is a different vet to our usual, I did mention it, but she didn't seem like she believed me.
Yeah.
Which I think is hit and miss with vet. Some of them are really into it, and some of them they're like, no, they can't tell you that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's an
Yeah.
interesting sort of train to follow, because I've asked a lot of community members that I've spoken to about their experience with veterinary care and if they've talked about the buttons. And it seems pretty, like you were saying, pretty hit and miss. There are some vets that are like interested and curious. I know Mary Robinette takes a travel board with Elsie, and her
Yes.
veterinary team will use the buttons with Elsie. And then other vets are like, oh, okay. So it's not quite, we're not quite there yet.
Yeah.
There are so many learners that are self-reporting pain, and then their guardians will take them to the vet, and then lo and behold, they have an injury in their paw, which is exactly what they said. It's just phenomenal. It's so fascinating.
I think maybe there's a bit more opportunity for learners who have maybe chronic conditions, who see the vet more regularly, to have that communication. Yeah, I think with Henry, touch wood, still healthy, so we don't see the vet that often. Yeah. So I guess there's not a reason for them to remember him that well either.
Totally. Yeah. So how many buttons does Henry have now? And is there like a limit you're trying to stay within?
So he's got 54. Oh, he's got his little head here.
Oh, I can't see it.
Henry.
Hi, Henry. Hi, handsome. Oh.
Oh dear. Yeah, so he's got 54 at the moment, and I'm trying to keep it maybe about 100. And I've got planned out a list of potential next words up to about 80 something. So we'll see how we go from there. And now obviously I have my list, but then he's going to have his own ideas of what he wants.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and it's really interesting as well with the co-design, because I realized that he doesn't really want object buttons that much. But obviously to have a more rich conversation and for context and things, you do need some object buttons. So yeah, thinking about how to balance that as well.
Do you find that and maybe there's no difference here, but do you find that he uses the buttons that he chooses more than the buttons that you've chosen for him?
That's an interesting question. I think that I've been tracking it, but I have to say that I was the one that gave him annoying. He didn't ask for that one. Sometimes he doesn't want to choose. So I'll just say, okay, Henry, no choose, mom choose. And then he'd be like, yeah, okay, whatever. And I think when I gave him annoying, happy, and I think sound at the same time. And when I gave him those 3 buttons, I brought them to him where he was sunbathing. And I think he bunny kicked the annoying one. So yeah, so I guess he loved it from the start.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I was just curious. That would be some interesting data for me, I think. If a learner is capable of completely choosing their own board, like creating their own board, what would they do? How would that look? Or if somebody were to, here are the buttons that I've given him over here on these tiles, and the buttons that he's selected for himself over here in these tiles. So it would just be interesting data. Yeah.
I'm gonna have a look now that you said it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
What? Sorry. I would love to hear. Yeah, I would love to hear what you find.
Yeah. He definitely, when he chose no and when he chose now, he definitely used them a lot.
Yeah.
In the food context again, to tell me he wasn't going to eat the wet food and wanted to feed the food now. Yeah.
That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is fair.
Yeah.
I love when our learners get bossy because they can, because now they have the ability to really self-select what activities, what enrichment, what food. And I think having that, with great power comes great responsibility. I just love when our learners are able to boss us around, because I think so much of how we live with non-humans is about this sort of arbitrary hierarchy, us being in control, and not really meeting their needs in a way that is holistic, because we don't necessarily know what those needs are. And this gives them a way to really self-advocate, which can feel bossy. But I think when we pare it down, it's the same as us saying, I'm going to go to Starbucks now, or I'm going to take a shower now because I want to, or I'm going to go outside and work in the yard right now because I can, because I want to. Us really having the agency to choose how we structure our day. So is it bossy, or is it just what they deserve?
Yeah, I guess so. I think of it as having opinions.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. 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 And then, I 100% agree with what you're saying about living with pets. It's like we're enforcing our will on them most of the time, right? And people who don't talk to their pets, or they don't have agency, basically you are enforcing your will on the animal. But yeah, it's been a really interesting journey in that I almost treat him a bit like an equal. We have chats. How are you feeling about this? Oh yeah, we're complaining about that. Okay. And yeah, it's funny. Yeah.
I think that's a rather profound part of giving a non-human buttons. There's something on its surface that feels so anthropocentric, right? About demanding or expecting this other species to speak in our language, right? On its surface, it could look that way. But what happens is that it becomes very hard for us to ignore what they're saying when they're saying it in our language. We start listening in a different way. We start observing their behavior in a more nuanced fashion. We start thinking about what would they want to say, or giving them the option to choose what they want to say, because there's been that switch in our brain. It's impossible to ignore an animal that says, I love you, mom, or I have a pain in my stomach, right? In your language. It's impossible. You have to start listening differently.
Yeah, 100%. And I started talking with him and teaching him hand choice and all those kinds of things because I was a first-time cat mom and I wasn't good at body language. And so I thought, I'm not so good at your language. Can I teach you to speak mine? And he's really outshone really what I imagined he could do. Yeah.
That's incredible. That's similar for me. I didn't know anything about dogs when I got Bunny, and I was just like, I want to have the best communication possible and the closest relationship possible. And giving her this tool, as you call it, as I like to call it, also enabled me to listen in ways that I don't think I would have been able to in any other way. Yeah.
And it's like a feedback loop as well, right? Because now
Absolutely.
with the words, then it helps me read the body language because I have the words to go with it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the context, we're looking at a much bigger picture. We can read their body language, and we're never going to be perfect at that because it's so nuanced, that because we're not dogs, right? Or we can read their body language and listen to the words that are being used and view the additional context and really zoom out and paint a much larger picture than we could have by taking any one of those things individually.
Yeah, 100% agree.
I'm wondering what has changed most about you since you've started this journey with Henry?
I think maybe I've become a better listener. Yeah, because I said earlier about how originally as a pet owner, you might be enforcing your will on them, but now that they have the ability to tell you what they actually want, you kind of have to listen. And it's I recall an interview with Mary Robinette, and she was saying it's like living in sci-fi. And I'm just really interested to see where it can go, because I'm at the point now where I believe in it. I believe he knows what he's saying. So where are the boundaries? What's the limit of this? And that's maybe some of the scientifically speaking as well.
Yeah, I love that. I feel exactly the same way. Where can we go from here? And the fact that thousands and thousands of people are now exploring this, and we're able to crowdsource all of this information and share these experiences, it feels like there's no limit, right? And what's next? And how can we transfer this awareness of animal sentience and consciousness to other species? And how can we help other humans understand that what's going on in their companion animals' heads is so much more complex than they previously thought? I think it has a lot of power to shift the paradigm in terms of what we think of animal welfare, what that looks like, how we communicate, all of those things. I think we have a long way to go, but we've already come a really long way in the last 7 years.
Yeah, we have. Yeah.
Amazing. This has been such an enriching conversation talking about enrichment. I've really enjoyed getting to know you and your learner, and you've left me with so much to think about. Do you have any final thoughts or anything you'd like to share?
Are you going to ask me to be controversial?
Oh, yes. I almost forgot. Oh my gosh. Thank you. Last question.
Yeah.
Do you have a controversial opinion about cats' behavior or buttons that you would be willing to share with us?
I've got a couple of different ones, so maybe you can pick which one you want. But my pet peeve, probably I'll call it, is equating the number of buttons to intelligence. And this is probably a self-explanatory from this talk already, because obviously my board or Henry's board is optimized. So, it's the way he's using it rather than the number of buttons that reflects how far he's come. And if you've got a board with 50 buttons, by the majority of them are like nouns and object words, it's no less, right? It's just a different learner profile. And I think a lot of people don't get that nuance. So it's always, my learner has X number of buttons, and then it stops there. I feel like, okay, your learner has X number of buttons, but what exactly is their style? And and I find that really interesting. So early on, Henry started with quite a lot of abstracts. I think within his first 10 buttons, we had maybe about 3 or 4 of them already abstracts. And that's because he had the vocabulary already. But I had a number of questions, from the community, well-meaning ones are you going too fast? Is it too soon? And I had to continuously explain that he already knows them. We're just putting them on buttons. And I think that's also something to bear in mind for people, that if your learner does know the words, don't limit yourself, right? And you don't have to follow so-called best practice, because best practice is for a certain style of learner that from coming to it completely fresh. And if you need to think about what building blocks you already have, that effectively it's like giving yourself extra credit, right? Yeah, when taking a class. Yeah, so that's my pet peeve on the button count thing. So when I post about Henry's buttons and stuff, you'll find that I don't talk so much about button count nowadays. And I'm talking more about the philosophy that I have around the optimized board and that kind of thing, and working with hand choices together with the buttons. And I think the other thing that I'll also say that I've noticed along the way, and bearing in mind that I don't have a long history with pets or animals in general, I think that cats communicate quite differently to dogs. And I think this is probably a result of the way their lives are structured. The dogs are a lot more social, I think, than cats are. They go out, they meet lots of people, and cats, lots of them are indoors. They live a very maybe internal life. But maybe that means that they are a little bit more internally focused, and they want to talk about their internal experience. And maybe some of that is colored by me having Henry being mostly indoors. But I also wonder about that, because I know the research started with dogs and then it expanded to cats, and which also means that a lot of the training methods are for dogs that then gets expanded to cats. And I think now there's 1 or 2 maybe sessions on the Film Pet Academy that's talking about how you teach cats. And I think that's really helpful to have, because cats are not dogs. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. I think it's so important for us to be exploring all the ways in which different species learn and different types of learners learn, like species household, multi-learner families, disabled learners who are more, what is the word I'm looking for? Introverted versus extroverted, social versus non-social, play motivated versus food motivated. I think there are so many factors that go into that. And I agree, word count is not emblem. What's the word I'm looking for? Noun. I am losing my words left and right today.
Intelligence?
Yeah, no, just the word
Yeah.
count. The number of buttons that a learner has shouldn't limit its communication, because it's communicating in as many ways as it possibly can all the time. And it doesn't say anything about their intelligence or their cognitive capacity. Yeah. Like you said, there are other ways. There's two-hand choice, there's body language. We need to be bringing together all of the ways in which they're communicating to paint the big picture.
Yeah, agree. Then
Awesome. Thank you for that. So appreciate this chat. And I can't wait to see where you go from here.
thank you so much. And yeah, it's been a real honor to speak to you. I never imagined when I started buttons that I'd be talking to you, the
Aw.
OG of buttons. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. That's very flattering.
Subscribe.